Let's have a hand for Gary Deinstadt.
You know, a few months ago, I was asked to be your guest speaker today, and I was honored to be asked and flattered, and I'm truly grateful to be with you all here today. So when I received the invite, I immediately said yes, with enthusiasm. And then I asked, what do you want me to talk on? What's the theme of the conference? And they said, living the teachings, heart, mind, and soul. And then I thought to myself, oh, crap. It's like, what could I possibly say to Urantia book readers that they don't already know about living the teachings? And especially something so personal as one's heart, mind, and soul. So in putting this together, I decided, first decision was no shoulds. I don't know about you, but I hate shoulds. I run from them. Would you believe a distant relative once said to me, Gary, you should get a new jacket. You've been wearing that same jacket at every Thanksgiving for the last 20 years. And actually, we're having a difficult time trying to figure out which Thanksgiving it is when you're in the picture. So, now the joke at my expense didn't bother me because I give it, so I've learned how to take it. But the should sure did. As soon as I heard that word should, I said, hell, I'm going to be wearing that jacket every Thanksgiving, every Christmas Eve, every Easter, you know, Rosh Hashanah. I'm not even Jewish. So I promised no shoulds, so no shoulds, but in my attempt to tiptoe around the shoulds, my talk may seem to be a little unorthodox, but I think that's already happened. The horse has already left the barn, yes. Do you remember those, when you were a kid, those mix-match jokes? You know, it's like, what do you get when you cross something with something else? So here's an example. What do you get when you cross a cow and a detective? If you know the answer, go ahead, jump, yell it out. A stakeout. Wait, there's more. What do you get when you cross a caterpillar and a parrot? A walkie-talkie. Yeah, I just want to let you know I looked about 100 of these things, and these are the best ones. But my personal fave is, what do you get when you cross a cow and a duck? Wait for it. Cheese and crackers. It still brings a smile to my face. I mean, I was roaring at 5 years old, but... So yes, I will stop. I know how to take a hint. And you're probably wondering where I'm going with all this. You know, I'm beginning to think they'd put me on last so everybody wouldn't leave if I was the first one that went on. No, there's a pattern here. I mean, the act was a response to a relationship. What was created couldn't have been accomplished without the other. And the result is now reflective of the parts involved. What was made invisible is now made visible. I know this is sort of a long way to the point, but... So I thought I'd up my game. I thought I was doing pretty good with farm animals. So I thought I would try two personalities. And just for the fun of it, I thought I'd cross myself with God. I don't suggest it. It didn't work. It just got too complicated. But I wasn't ready to give up after the first try. So I thought I would try something simpler, like just crossing our names. Let's just start there. So you have God and Gary. Now, one thing I do have in common with God that most of you don't is that our names begin with the letter G. So G will be first and foremost, right? Now, there's too many vowels to make sense of anything, so I took one out of each, and then I sort of mixed them up, and then I added some like spice, some salt and pepper, so to speak. So, drum roll. What do you get when you cross God with Gary? Guard. What can I say? You're welcome. No, but seeing is believing. Is Guard here? Or he's never going to talk to me again. I hope he's not. Well, I think in living the teachings, it wouldn't hurt to have a sense of humor. Or just not taking yourself too seriously, which that has never happened to me. So is it seeing is believing, or is it believing is seeing? I can understand how people can see something and create a belief. I could also understand how somebody with a deep belief in something can see something to come into focus. And then there are those who can't believe in what they're seeing. It's like, for example, we just saw a walkie-talkie, but I don't think there's anybody in the room here that thinks that that came from a caterpillar and a parrot. Right? Just checking. So, but I think both sides would agree that there are some things we can't see, but we know it exists because of its effect on what we can see. But I think there's even a greater belief here that both sides would agree on, and that's believing in the possibilities. So, fortunately for us, we have the Urantia book, and the revelation of the adjuster and supremacy probably gives us a better feel than most of the potential of each one of us, ourselves and everything else around us. So I would think that living the teachings, you'd have to think outside of the box. You'd have to believe in the possibilities. And just for a footnote, if you can get cheese and crackers out of a cow and a duck, anything is possible. That's it, no more farm animals. That's the end of that segment. I promise I won't do any more of that. Well, David Marta Elders had a house in Darien, Connecticut, and it was right on the Long Island Sound. And you'd be able to stand on the deck and you look out at the periphery of their property. They had these marshes that were just filled with wildlife, and of course the Long Island Sound was behind that. And I'm standing on this deck looking at this beautiful view, and I have Steve Dreyer standing next to me. And Steve goes, he says, once he saw a bird here that was obviously not from this area. And then he paused for a moment, and then he said that he didn't have to see where the bird came from to know that that place existed. And then, in true Steve Dreyer form, he just walked off and left me to deal with the possibilities of what he just shared. So something you couldn't see was made visible by its relationship to what you could see. And again, this couldn't have been accomplished without the other. It's sort of reminiscent of, being in this world and not of it. Or like what Jesus said at his ordination sermon, that you are no longer men among men, but the enlightened citizens of another heavenly country. So to follow Steve's thinking, if you could look upon one of those men, you wouldn't have to see the heavenly country to know that it existed. Which says to me is that you don't have to prove that God exists once you become reflective of that reality. So I would think that teachings Living living the teachings heart, mind, and soul has to be reflective of who and where it came from. Steve was not only a valued friend, he was a mentor to me. Many times, I find myself in having to make a decision, and I wouldn't have to bother my adjuster or the Spirit of Truth. I could just say to myself, what would Steve do? and that was enough. I mean, Steve was imperfect like the rest of us, but any imperfections he had often became clouded by his godlikeness. And that's something you could see. Do you remember when Jesus said to Philip, when you've seen me, you've seen the Father? Well, imagine if they saw you and saw the Father. It's very possible. Do you remember when Jesus again ran into the man who wasn't ready yet for human salvation, that he needed more time? Or if he lived with us, we might, by our lives, show him the Father in heaven. So by our lives, we can show the Father in heaven. We can make the invisible visible. Now, what do you get when you cross a truth seeker and a truth giver? Well, the book tells us the result is a great and liberating enlightenment born of the experience of new truth. Now, I never told Steve that I thought of him as a mentor. It was just the nature of our friendship. But there was enlightenment born of the experience of new truth. The American Heritage Dictionary defines a mentor as one who acts as a wise and faithful guide. John C. Maxwell said one of the greatest values of mentors is the ability to see ahead, what others cannot see, and to help them navigate a course to their destination. Bob Proctor said a mentor is someone who sees more talent and ability within you than you see in yourself and helps bring it out of you. And Steven Spielberg said, the delicate balance of mentoring someone is not creating them in your own image, but giving them the opportunity to create themselves. So to summarize, the ideal mentor would have to be a wise and faithful guide, someone who not only recognizes your talents and abilities, but can help bring them out. Someone who can see what you can potentially become and then navigate a course to achieve it. And finally, someone who could provide the opportunity and the space for you to create it for yourself. Well, who does that better than God? In my attempt to find a working partnership with God, sometimes it helps me to think of him as a mentor. What I mean by a working relationship is sort of the effort and the skill set that you develop in becoming more God-like. In paper 12, The Universes of Universes, it says, do not allow, I love this, the magnitude of the infinity, the immensity, the eternity, and the grandeur and the glory of the matchless character of God to overawe, stagger, or discourage you. Easier said than done. And this is why we'd probably have a difficult time with the first source and center. But with God the Father, obviously, we have this very father-child relationship. And I think in one of the things of becoming God-like is learning how to love like God loves. And I think that that's what happens in that relationship. But I don't know about you, still having God as your father is a bit intimidating to me. But as a mentor, it puts us on an equal playing field. We need each other. We're totally dependent on each other. In a mentorship, It's not only in the observing and the doing things. The fun part is doing it alongside the person you want to become. God by your side. I love that vision. Excuse me. Sorry. So what happened when we crossed something with something else? Well, the one was not greater than the other, but the response and the result was. So when you finally fuse with your adjuster, it won't be the Father that will just be well pleased. It will be you too. I'm not sure what that's going to look or feel like, but my guess is there will be a great sense of accomplishment, and like Jesus, you'll become a reflection of that reality. So bear with me as I continue to keep God in this very limited mentorship scenario. But as a mentor, what do you think he does? I mean, he leads. Every good mentor leads. He leads you Godward. God's will was never a demand. Mentors don't make demands. Remember, the Spirit never drives. It only leads. It's just a simple desire to be led by the God who sees what you're truly capable of becoming. And he loves, obviously. He loves by sharing all that he can so that you can begin to become all that you can be. And he creates. He creates everything. But so do we. We create music, we create art, we create dramas. We create our own problems and we create solutions. We're innovative. We can create a home, a loving home with loving people in it. It sort of makes sense to me why we're so hardwired to be creative. Because how could we ever begin to co-create if we weren't creative in the first place? Thank God for personality. You know, in my entire work life, I've been paid for my creativity. So it's something that you might think I would know something about. Well, yes and no. A few years ago, I was helping Peter Lawrence stuff some envelopes for an interfaith event. And, you know, it doesn't take a lot of brain cells to stuff envelopes. So we had a lot to talk about. So he asked me a question. He goes, so Gary, what are you working on these days? Well, I'm creating some music for a recording project of mine. Then he says, well, do you think you can create something that's never been created before? I was totally thrown by this question. I mean, didn't he hear what I just said? So I quickly said, yeah, of course. And then I think he said, well, then who does it belong to? And I'm thinking, you know, I just told him that I created this thing. It's my project. So just to get out of the conversation, I said, I wrote it. It belongs to me. But of course, you know, Peter's been a longtime friend of mine and also a mentorship in many ways. I don't think I would have ever gone down the interfaith path if it wasn't for Peter. So I gave his words a great deal of thought. Now, I'm not sure if this is the message that he was trying to convey, or even if he was trying to convey a message, but it's the one I walked away with. That creativity is the process of discovery, and what you're discovering is the unfolding of what was always there. What God has created has always been there. It sort of made me think about all the great music that's been created by the same 12 notes, or all the beautiful art that's been created from the same palette of colors. I mean, what's uniquely ours is the effort and experience of discovering it, finding it for ourselves. You know, in an orchestra, I'm not moved so much by what I'm doing. I'm too busy trying to get my part right and pay attention to a conductor. What's moving me are what the people are doing around me. And we're all being lifted up by the whole of what we're all playing a part in. The personal joy for me and the sense of accomplishment comes from discovering the greater sum. Living the teachings with your heart, your mind, and your very own soul sounds like a solo endeavor. But it's not. What motivates you to live the teachings began with a simple response to a relationship. Could have been your adjuster. Could have been your mentor. Could have been all these talented, loving children of God around you. You know, in Paper 101, it says, in the real nature of religion, it says, through the appropriation of the faith of Jesus, mortal man can foretaste in time the realities of eternity. Now, Jesus made the discovery in human experience of the final Father, and his brothers in the flesh and mortal life can follow him along the same experience of Father discovery. They can even attain, as they are, the same satisfaction and this experience with the Father as did Jesus as he was. And new potentials were actualized in the universe of Nebadon, consequent upon the terminal bestowal of Michael, and one of these was the new illumination of the path of eternity that leads to the Father of all. So as I mentioned, God leads, he loves, and he creates. With our heart, mind, and soul, we can lead in the same way that God leads. We can love in the way we're being loved by God, and we can help create the environment for the unfolding of what was always there. You could probably say Jesus was the perfect mentor. He was wise, faithful guide, who not only recognized one's gifts, but could help bring them out. He not only saw others by who and what they were, but by who and what they were capable of becoming. And he provided the space for them to create and discover it all for themselves. Well, we can all do this too. You know, it's amazing to me to think that a simple follow me would lead to the illuminated path of eternity that leads to the Father of all. So, you know, as we discover new possibilities, we create new ones. Remember, enlightenment born of that experience of new truth. The potential to love is always there. And the act of loving allows us to discover more of it. In the process of loving more and loving more of, we actualize new potentials. We can illuminate the path. We can lead as we're being led to the Father of all. In Paper 2, In the Nature of God, it's a familiar quote. It says, the religious challenge of this age is those far-seeing and forward-looking men and women of spiritual insight who will dare to construct a new and appealing philosophy of living out of the enlarged and exquisitely integrated modern concepts of cosmic truth, universe beauty, and divine goodness. Again, this is all of you. You are these far-seeing and forward-looking men and women of spiritual insight, living out with a whole heart, mind, and soul the enlarged and exquisitely integrated modern concepts of cosmic truth, universe beauty, and divine goodness. And when others begin to see a reality in you that was once invisible, they'll begin asking themselves, what's going on around me right now that I'm not taking full advantage of? And that's the gift that keeps on giving. And this all began with a simple response to a relationship. What you've created with a whole heart, through mind, your soul, in partnership with God, couldn't have been accomplished without the other. By your lives, you become a reflection of this reality, and your branches now bear much fruit. You've made the invisible visible. And such a new and righteous vision of morality will attract all that is good in the mind of man and challenge which is best in the human soul. You know, as I said earlier, I promised no shoulds. It's really all up to you. But again, an absolute, eternal loving Father, a beautiful God, wouldn't have it any other way. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.